Hello? Welcome to Night, where the dark speaks and true stories haunt. This channel brings you real horror experiences, urban legends, and chilling encounters that people have truly lived through. Every episode is based on actual stories, told in a way that pulls you into the shadows. From haunted houses to unsolved disappearances, strange family secrets to ancient curses, we explore the kinds of stories that leave you questioning what's real. Perfect for late night listening or a lonely commute home. Subscribe and let the night in. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Story tittle: The Man Who Sold Second Chances. There's a man who visits town once a year. No one knows where he comes from. No one ever sees him arrive. No one ever sees him leave. But every summer without fail, just after midnight in the muggy August heat, he appears. Under a starless, inky black sky, he sits behind a small wooden booth at the edge of the old highway, displaying a sign boasting second chances, fair prices. I'd never deigned to visit the rickety, carnival-esque stand that promised a different future. It was meant for those who regret. This isn't to say I didn't have more than a few choices in life I saw as being worthy of second-guessing, but there was nothing that I looked upon with reproach. There was no desperate need for repentance that bubbled deep within my gut. No desire to visit the man who sold second chances. But in late March, when the first signs of sweetness from blooming magnolia trees tinged the air, a decision settled itself so deeply in the recesses of my consciousness that every moment was filled with a cold, merciless weight refusing to settle in my chest. Pangs of guilt ricocheted wildly against my ribcage, rebounding off a bone like a ball-peen hammer on steel, with each impact leaving a sharp, ringing ache that built an unbearable pressure in my sternum. But I deserved these inescapable feelings. I deserved to have been granted the ceaseless collision of regret and remorse, leaving behind the unbearable knowledge that the past cannot be undone. It was such a simple favor, a text reading. Can you come pick me up? I've got a weird feeling, and I don't feel safe walking anymore. Followed by 3 missed calls. Then the frantic voicemail. Seriously, please pick up? I think this guy is following me. Another missed call. Then radio silence. I noticed all of this at just past 1 in the morning. The messages and calls had been left in succession. 11:42 p.m., 11:47 p.m., 11:53 p.m., 11:54 p.m. Nothing. I had silenced my phone because I was studying. And as soon as I saw how serious things seemed to be, why Emily had tried to contact me so many times, I called back. No answer. I ran to my car, panic-stricken and feverishly dialing and redialing her number. I knew where she had been and the route she would have taken to get home. But no matter how many times I retraced the steps my friend would have taken just an hour ago, the street remained empty. It's June now, and the search for Emily has fizzled out. The police have resigned the belief that she is dead, and if nothing has been discovered at this point, a body will likely never be found. The case files will sit in a cardboard box gathering dust, unsolved, scrawled in block letters across its front. Silencing my phone that night isn't a decision that carried so much shame. No, the shame stemmed from a decision I had made after that. Amongst a string of texts and missed calls, there was a piece of evidence that condemned me to this misery. A single message that led me to the man who sold second chances. Read 11:43 p.m. Underscore. The sickly sweet smell of magnolia heavily perfumed the air. It's August, and their blossoms have almost all but disappeared from their spindly perches in the trees, littering the ground with rotting corpse petals that signal the end of summer. But the stench that lingered on the breeze brought with it a reminder. Soon, a makeshift booth will be constructed on the edge of town, and soon I'd be given an opportunity to pick up my phone. The opportunity to live the rest of my life without having to stare at that last text, listen to that voicemail. The opportunity to hear more of my friend's voice in fear. And so I waited. There was no set date for when the man would appear to construct his booth, but there were signs to look for. There would be no stars, and the night sky would be a deep void of blackness, without even the subtle glow of the moon to offer any reprieve. People in town said these astrological anomalies happened because all the possibilities of all the second chances needed to be the only thing people looked towards. I don't know how much I believed the superstition, but I did believe in the man. I believed in what he offered. And finally, the night came. It was August 19th when I looked up and noticed that there was no light to be found. Heaven was no longer the thing providing a path forward. The man who sold second chances had come to town. I got in my car and drove to where the main thoroughfare in town branched off into a few side streets, one which eventually turned into the worn road that was now the old highway. Once I came across it, I parked my car and started to walk. I didn't know how far I'd need to go, but I knew to trust the path that I was on. The minutes ticked by and I kept walking, and doubt started to creep into the edges of my mind. And then there he was. He wasn't as odd as I thought he would be. He looked pretty normal. Maybe normal isn't the right word, but unassuming? He wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. He wore a shabby, colorless suit, and from under his booth, the toes of a pair of polished wingtips jutted out. I approached and noticed how worn the wood was. How faded the sign. How long had he been doing this? Who was he, really? I didn't know what to say or where to start. My chest was aching with the same guilt it had carried for months, and the pulse of my heart had quickened to an erratic rhythm, urgent and desperate, like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. But before I could calm myself enough to speak, the man reached out and beckoned for me to take his hand. The moment our hands touched, everything slipped away except for the feeling of his dry, waxy skin against mine. And then my mind was bursting with memories. Not just the memory of my decision, but all the paths that could have been. I couldn't make sense of any of them. There was too much going on. All I could discern were the millions, no trillions, of possibilities branching outward, shimmering like frayed threads of reality. The man who sold second chances did not have to ask me what I wanted. He knew. He had felt in me long before I arrived. The gnawing, marrow-deep ache of regret, the weight of mistake that had been festering like an open wound that refused to heal. And he was showing me that it didn't have to be so. Just as I thought the overwhelming rush of possibilities was going to make my head explode, a voice, his voice, unfolded inside of my skull like paper being peeled away. "Are you sure?" he said. "Knowledge is free, but second chances are costly." There wasn't an ounce of hesitation in my nod. Abruptly, our hands disconnected, and I knew I had made a horrible mistake. I started to notice things about him I hadn't noticed before. His suit didn't fit him, but not in any way that made sense. It seemed as though it wasn't meant for the body beneath it. Too loose in places that should have hugged him, too tight where there should have been space. And I swear as I stared, it shifted, the fabric rippling like it was breathing. His tie hung too low, too thin. Its texture wasn't silky, but more like something wet, something living, and it writhed when he moved. The buttons were all wrong, too, mismatched in size and shape, and when he moved, they didn't catch the light like normal metal. They absorbed it, as if each one were a tiny, sightless eye. And that's when I realized the man who sold second chances was no man at all. Not really. He wore the shape of a man, long-limbed, draped in an ill-fitting suit that moved against his frame like it was trying to swallow him whole. His fingers were too long, jointed in the wrong places, the knuckles swollen and bulbous, flexing under pale, purple-veined skin. His face was wrong, a stretched, waxen mockery of human skin with a too-wide mouth that unfolded like a wound. Inside, his teeth looked like splintered bone, frayed at the edges, as if he'd been chewing on something he shouldn't have, something still alive. And his eyes, God, his eyes, they weren't where they should be. They drifted, sliding too far apart or pressing too close together, like they were never meant to stay in one place. My racing thoughts that were trying to make sense of the grotesque thing that had been revealed to me were interrupted by a sound. No, a sensation, a whisper that burrowed under my skin, an ache in my teeth, a shudder that reached the marrow in my bones. The man was not speaking in words. He was unraveling them, like an old tape playing backward, filling the air with the sense that the price for what I had just agreed to would be far more than I had bargained for. And there was always a price. Underscore, 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 underscore. The man who sold second chances doesn't work like a genie, granting wishes for his freedom from a lamp, nor is he like the devil at the crossroads, dealing a way out as a consequence of an impossible trade. No, the man who sold second chances promises a fair price, and his gifts are neither miracles nor curses. There's something far more unnatural, something that feels like time itself shuddering, unraveling, stitching itself back together in ways it was never meant to. Money meant nothing to him. What he wanted was regret, sorrow, mistakes. And so, when he reached out his vain, leathery hands to clasp mine too gently, too intimately, he took. Now, my regret had teeth. What had once sat in my chest like a stone lodged too deep, pressing against my lungs, making every breath feel shallow, unearned, was now gnashing, gnawing, devouring me, driven by a hunger that could never be sated. It was tearing at my insides like a starving animal. Strings of saliva stretching between its jagged, restless fangs, mindlessly consuming whatever was caught between them. The hole inside of me grew wider, and the world around me felt a little more wrong with each passing second. And then there was nothing. This was almost worse than the unnatural, insatiable guilt. Now, there was a tension left behind, a coil in its jaw as it waited, anticipating the next bite. This pause and feeling left my thoughts twitching, as if stop and contrition I had become accustomed to was more unbearable than the act of feeling itself. I snapped back to reality, finally able to focus my vision for the first time in what felt like hours, only to see that I was home. Checking my phone, I confirmed it was just after midnight on August 19th. And I noticed a text from Emily. Did you do the summer reading? Class starts in 2 days, and there's no way I'm going to finish. I was hoping to borrow your notes. Sent 20 minutes ago. My second chance had been granted, but what was a fair price for the life of my friend? The past has been rewritten seamlessly. The guilt that had found a home in my chest was gone. But deep down, I knew it wasn't free. Had allowing the man to feed on my misery been enough? That didn't feel right. The only thing that felt fair was a life for a life. I hurriedly opened up my laptop and searched missing persons plus March plus Bainbridge. Me and found what I was looking for, a series of articles that had once been about Emily. Local woman goes missing after night out. The search is on for missing woman. Missing persons case goes cold, but the headlines had changed. Now, the face of another woman is staring back at me from the flyers splashed across every web page. Emily was meant to die that night, but by undoing fate, I doomed someone else to take on her final moments instead. My mistake never happened, but someone else paid the price for me. Another woman walked home alone in Emily's place. I searched the woman's name, hoping to find out something about her that would make me feel better about my decision. She was a teacher, a new mother, someone's wife, someone's friend, just like Emily had been mine. I was going to be sick. I ran to the bathroom and retched, clearing my stomach of its contents while burning my throat. I splashed water on my face and looked in the mirror, and a scream ripped from my lungs. It wasn't my reflection staring at me. It was hers, the woman who took Emily's place. She was staring, hollow-eyed, lips moving without sound. I could only just barely make out what she was trying to communicate. Was it worth it? And that's when I realized why the man who sold second chances appears when there are no stars, when the sky is devoid of all light. It's not so that people could look towards their second chances with hope. It was so that when you paid, your grief had nowhere to go. It was so that when your second chance was granted, you'd be left with nothing inside but an even deeper guilt, a depth so dark, so hollow, it felt like looking into a hole dug too deep, a hole that had no bottom, and on that he could feast. Second chances are not given. They are taken, stolen, carved from the bones of time itself, and the man who sells it will always be there for those who need them most. I work as a blood courier for the undead. That's what they like to call it. I think it's meant to sound better than delivery boy for bloodthirsty vampires. 26 years after the fall of the human race, and yet even the undead use the same corporate lingo. I work for a company specializing in at-home sustenance packs. This allows nearly every vamp to feed in the absence of their main food source. Following nearly 90% of all human lives being extinguished, the vamps moved extremely fast in creating a stable and reliable food source. Pair that with the pretty genius move of turning the more needed humans, biologists, engineers, doctors, and voila, 6 months later you get the bottomless blood oasis, feeding each of the world's big cities. More oases began to be produced. This was in an effort to move away from live feeding entirely. Eventually, the outlawing of live feeding became a reality 2 years later. Protected humans like myself are far and few between, but necessary for the undead. See, they could produce the blood, but distribution was trickier. Fighting, stealing, black market selling. Vamps quickly realized that it wasn't sustainable to employ their peers for this job. Eventually, the new government was left with no choice but to offer an ultimatum. Any remaining humans not already protected would receive protection in exchange for becoming drivers, couriers, and other distribution-related jobs. I was just 10 when my dad took the offer as a courier, allowing my mom and I the same protected privileges. We received housing akin to a shoddy New York apartment, but housing nonetheless. We received rations of food, but were still able to cook with ingredients found in other places. We were always given looks or had our fair share of run-ins with vamps unwilling to obey the protective order. They were handled by the militia pretty quickly, but not always fast enough. The years passed and the protective order became part of everyday life. Sure, there are still casualties. It's unavoidable, but nowadays humans are more seen like cats or dogs. Pets who provide some purpose. At least I think we do. Being a courier still isn't 100% safe, obviously. Every other week you hear about some poor soul who was stupid enough to enter a vamp's place, only to find their mutilated remains in the local dumpster. My father taught me his rules for delivering and made sure I never forgot them. First and foremost, son, 1. Never under any circumstances go into a house, apartment, anywhere they live. You may hear cries for help, see some unfortunate person lying there, or the recipient may ask for your hand bringing it in for them. Don't do it. If you want to end up being used for God knows what, then be my guest. 2. Never hand a package to them directly. Place it on the floor and wait for them to pick it up. The real desperate ones will be okay with just getting your hand off. Don't give them that chance. 3. Always wear your issued sunglasses. If you forget them, do not look them directly in the eye. The feral ones will have your jugular and their mouth on their couch before you even realize you made direct eye contact. That was then. Now I'm ahead of my courier team in workplace safety. Mom and Dad passed a few years ago within a few months of each other. The burial service was humans only, which was nice, to feel some normalcy again. It only resulted in about 10 people showing up though. 8 of them were co-workers with my dad. Most days now, I spend doing deliveries and saving up to maybe get out of this one day. Lately, we've been having to be more aware, as attacks by those who can afford their monthly supply get desperate. Today, when I got my daily route, I already recognized the face on my supervisor before I entered his office. Bad route today? Just be careful around stop 3. Remember that poor fellow from last week? He had that same spot. Got out to deliver. My supervisor took a breath. Before he even made it to the door, he has his chest turned to mush and throat cut to the bone. Jesus, it's still getting worse than. Yeah, it is. Those pale fucks are running the world to shit quicker than we did. We both looked down. A solemn moment took place while we remembered the world we had. Anyways, I know I don't need to tell you how to be safe, but thought I'd give you a heads up. I'll keep that in mind. Thanks. I walked out his office. It was obvious by the looks I got that everyone knew I pulled the short stick. They cared enough to give me a slight smile here and there. Joey, a longtime friend of mine, was the first to actually approach me. We began walking to the fulfillment area. Bad run of luck, man. I'm sure you'll be fine, though. They don't seem to linger around the same spots long, especially after killing one of us. Yeah, I'm more worried about the rookies. We're losing more. Poor bastards. New World Order's more the same. We reached the rows of bags, each with an assigned last name, some filled with the packages waiting to be delivered. I found mine in the same spot it's been for years. I began to unload it, checking out what addresses I had, planning the fastest routes and avoiding the most dangerous ones. I sighed as I saw Stop 3's address, but kept planning. I remembered something looking at the addresses. Hey, did you ever hear back from that one courier out west? Joey furrowed his brow, but then quickly his eyes lit up as he remembered too. Oh yeah. Joey quickly sat down next to me and lowered his voice. So this guy works in one of the branches out west and goes for his normal route, right? He's delivering and starts to notice the area he's in is like really high class. 3 to 4 story mansions type stuff. Not like normal rich, but the elder one's rich. I raised my eyebrows and listened even more intently. So he arrives at the house and is waiting for the homeowner to answer. Finally, after like 5 minutes of waiting, who answers the door except for the goddamn governor of the state. Bullshit. No. Listen, so apparently the distribution branch thought the courier they assigned was one cleared for high-profile deliveries. And the governor also thinks this. So he lets the courier in on something only meant for the higher-ups. He tells him, soon enough you'll be in a house all to yourself too. They're planning on giving all couriers in that distribution district real houses. No more cheap, shitty apartments. That actually sounds like they kind of respect our kind over there somewhat. Might have to move my family out there if what he said is true. The kids getting their own backyard is a dream. It was nice to have a shred of hope for a better life, if even just temporarily. What would be the point for me, though? I don't have any kids or a partner to share it with. Still can't say I wouldn't prefer a queen-size bed over a cot. Well, dash. Joey stood up. I got a delivery over on Woodworth. So, if you don't see me again, Joey gave a sarcastic salute with an overly serious face. I'd be so lucky. I said to him while Joey continued walking, leaving only with his middle finger raised. I proceeded with packing my order bag and made sure to pack extra protection. Vamp's weaknesses aren't too dissimilar to what we've been taught in pop culture. Crucifixes, holy water, silver, all help against the undead, but their effectiveness has been greatly exaggerated. At most, silver and holy water will buy you a few minutes to run. Crucifixes can get you out of a bad spot, as long as your eyes don't leave your target. It requires 100% concentration and intention to even begin to work. These are our only means of protection, which means awareness is the biggest job requirement. Today I had 4 deliveries. Stop 1. My first delivery was in the upper suburbs. 4-bedroom house. Family of 5. 3 boxes of sustenance packs. The hedges were trimmed to with clinical precision. They were too perfect. Everything about the house was. The length of the grass, the walkway to the door, the kids' toys that scattered the lawn. Even the stepping stones were all the same color and shape. The only thing disrupting the artificial perfection were the crickets, which still didn't sound right. I grabbed the 3 boxes and brought them to the front door. I placed the boxes on the doorstep and rang the doorbell. The doormat read, "Family." The door opened, illuminating the shipment and myself. Why, hello. A tall one stood around 7 foot in the doorway. He had to crouch slightly to see me. He had a smile, but the same feeling of perfection oozed through his teeth. His voice sounded like someone trying to squeeze the last of their words out without any breath left. The clothes he wore didn't make sense either. He wore a black, round hat like a farmer's. His shirt was a dark green long sleeve. He wore tattered, white slacks and finished it off with combat boots. The look of confusion I had must have been noticeable as his voice broke the silence. Don't I need to scan? I quickly snapped out of my confusion. Right. Yes. Just need you to check the order to make sure it's correct. Yes. We wouldn't want any mistakes now. His inflection sounded rehearsed but not perfected. He opened the box with gentleness, making sure to pull the tape neatly off and replace it exactly the same. Once checked, he stood back up, once again towering over me, still smiling. Looks beautiful. I cracked a half grin. Okay, I just need to scan your ABI card and I'll be off. No problem. He reached into his back pocket, still not breaking eye contact. He opened his wallet and, without looking down, "Oh, it seems I misplaced my card." Despite the obvious, I simply replied, "I'd need an ABI card before I can officially deliver these, sir." His smile wavered slightly. "Let me go grab it one moment." He glided back into his house, leaving the door open. I stood in the doorway, making notes of the interior decor. A mirror, not needed, but another attempt at blending in. A rather modern kitchen, but extremely white like a dentist's office. No furniture, but a TV. A few minutes passed, and I grew impatient by the clear attempt to lure me in. "Find it yet?" I raised my voice slightly to be heard through the house. No response. The stillness of the atmosphere, especially for a family of 5, didn't match. "You can come in and take a seat." My apologies, as I still can't seem to find it. He called out from somewhere in the house. I rolled my eyes, and just as I was about to respond, I noticed something. A slight discoloration on the ceiling, just behind the top of the doorway. I squinted and realized it was a toe. I quickly took a far step from the doorway. I yelled back, "I have other deliveries I need to get to. If you find your ABI card, you can give us a call, and we'll come back tomorrow." Just as I squatted down to grab the boxes, his tattered slacks appeared in the doorway. He towered over me again. His smile was still plastered on. "Found it." I stared at him as I scanned his card, finishing the delivery. "Thank you. Have a good night, sir." I said, "You too as well, sir." He continued to smile, almost looking for approval that he used the right word. I walked back to my car, keeping my eyes on the doorway. He stood there waving even as I sat in my car and pulled up the next address. I began to drive off and noticed 4 other figures now waving as I drove off. Stop 2. Nothing out of the ordinary. Apartment unit. Customer received package and thanked me. I got back in my car and saw my next stop. Fuck. Stop 3. Single bedroom apartment. Single resident. 1 box of sustenance packs. Richards Square has always been rough. I remember my dad telling me stories about the residents there. It's gotten significantly worse over the years, as more vamps choose to pretend it's not there. Starving, impoverished vamps are among the most dangerous. Yet, I still feel bad when I see one dying, starved on the side of the street, too weak to attack, abandoned, pulling up to delivery 3. The building looked like a failed demolition. The distant moans of the dying littered the trash-ridden streets. I approached the front door and buzzed the customer's apartment. A voice cut over the ancient speaker box. "What?" "Sustenance pack delivery for Mr. Callahan?" The voice over the intercom grunted. "Okay, close the front door behind you." The front door unlocked with a thudding steel bolt. I entered. The inside of the building wasn't much better. Mold covered the walls, and cracks in the foundation made it feel like an abandoned mine shaft. Surprisingly, the elevator worked, complete with the dank, mildew smell. I clicked the partially broken button for floor 6. The elevator strained to even close its doors. Arriving on floor 6, I was hit by a stench that immediately caused my eyes to water and my lunch to come up. It smelled of dumpster water, feces, ammonia, and decay. The added BO smell festered underneath the carpets, blending with the other stenches for an ungodly combination. I had to use my jacket to cover my nose, but even then it was difficult to move forward. Stepping onto the tattered, carpeted hallway immediately resulted in a horrid squishing sound. I didn't care or want to know what liquid soaked the carpet that I just stepped in. Through my watery vision, I looked for the apartment. I began to sweat and realized that the AIC was off as well. I had been so disoriented by the stench that I hadn't even noticed. I knocked on Mr. Callahan's door and waited for the door to open. I set the box down and stepped back. The door cracked open with only a sliver of an eye visible. "Hi, sir. Just need you to check the order and scan your ABI card and be on my way." The man grunted and stuck out his ABI card. His hand was thin and covered in sores. The skin was stretched like a canvas painting over the sullen bones that were also visible. "Oh, you didn't want to check it first?" "Do I need to? I just want to get this over with." I wasn't used to vamps accepting things at face value, especially their food orders. but I obliged his request and made a note that the resident waved checking their order. I scanned his card, completing the delivery. All right, have a good one, sir. Just get out quick. This place isn't good for your kind. Compassion from vamps has always been a rarity. It was odd but somewhat comforting that at least some vamps see us as more than mules. I nodded and made my way back to the elevator. Right before calling the elevator, I looked back at the apartment. The box still sat in front of the door, before that same painfully skinny hand slowly dragged it into darkness. I gave a slight smile to myself as I internally wished the tenant good luck. I was happy I was almost done with the day. The elevator groaned as it once again opened. I stepped in and the elevator closed. It began its descent. Floor 5, floor 4, floor 3. I was only 2 floors away from getting my last delivery, and then home I entered and waited to finally get out of there. After being in this place, I was in desperate need of a shower. But then, the elevator stopped. The doors opened on floor 3. I waited hoping it was just the elevator struggling to remember where it's supposed to actually stop. A man came rushing into the elevator, half naked and erratic. He was missing parts of skin from his stomach and legs. The blood had already dried with infection beginning to take hold on the wounds. His eyes were bloodshot, with deep circles under his eyes. He was profusely sweating, leading to his skin glistening even under the barely lit elevator. He was human. He looked at me and frantically said, Hey, you're not one of them. You have to help me, please. Human to human, please." I could only muster out a soft, "I can't." He didn't take it well. He frowned and immediately pushed the first floor button repeatedly, hoping it would speed up the process. I knew what was coming. In an instant, a decaying, gaunt figure stood before the stubborn elevator doors. The man screamed as he was pulled from the cart with frightening quickness. The vamp held the man's neck and faced me. Most of his teeth were rotted or missing. Even his most important canines looked hollow and brittle. Sores on the vamp's body had begun to rot, leading to maggots making their homes inside them. Dried blood from previous victims, including the man before me, caked his mouth and chest. The caked blood had been there for God knows how long and began to crack on his skin. He pulled the man's head to the side and bit down. Blood immediately gushed as his teeth punctured the jugular. His teeth were strong enough to fully puncture, though, leading him to bite again whilst tearing out a large chunk of the man's neck. I couldn't look away even while the elevator doors finally closed. Was I a bad person? Could I have helped him even if I wanted to? All I could do was buy him a few seconds, which would lead to my firing or death. He wouldn't have even made it to the front door either way. There's got to be more than this. Or maybe there isn't. Maybe I'm just lucky enough to somehow be alive in a place worse than before. I left the building and got back in my car. I entered my last address and drove off. Stop 4. Customer was not home. Knocked and rang doorbell 3 times with no response. Taking package back to dispatch. End of shift. We all know the risks going into this. Some of us have no choice, while others would rather do this than be on their own. The end of a shift is always somber. It's when we see who's come back and who didn't. On the days everyone comes back, the mood is vibrant throughout the building. But those days haven't been happening much lately. I don't know how often I'll update this, but if I don't, maybe it's just better to think I made it out west. Until then, it's best to follow my dad's rules passed down to me, and that I've passed down to you. Good luck, and stay safe out there.